Does it feel like every part of your life is divided? Every scenario, every environment, your church, your school, your work, your friends, left, right, conservative, liberal, religious, secular. It seems you always have to take a side. This is a conversation between a progressive Christian and a conservative atheist who happen to be great friends. Welcome to Living on Common Ground.
Do you think if we met today, we would still be friends?
I don't know. But we're friends now.
A mob is known as a mob because they are with you.
Man, so what? We won a few games. And y'all fools think that's something? Man, that ain't nothing, y'all. And you know what else? We ain't nothing either. Yeah, we came together in camp. Cool. But then we're right back here and the world tells us that they don't want us to be together. We fall apart like we ain't a damn bit of nothing, man.
For this week's episode, we had the opportunity to sit down and visit with professor, author, and podcast host Pete Enns. We discussed uncertainty, community, and his work with the Bible for normal people. You can find out more about Pete and support the work he's doing on Substack by searching Odds and Ends. A link is provided in this week's episode description. But now just sit back and relax, and we hope that you really enjoy the conversation. So, I'm Jeff.
Hey, Jeff.
And really excited to have you on, Pete. We're just going to jump right in if that's all right.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, perfect. So, I first came across what you're doing. Oh, it's been a few years now. I went out and I purchased the book Sin of Certainty.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was having some personal issues with how sure everyone was, and I felt like it was leading to a lot of problems within the community that I was a part of.
Right.
But then when I read that, then I was like, well, this is brilliant. And so then I went back and I bought How the Bible Actually Works.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Bible Tells Me So.
Okay.
Then I pre-ordered Curveball,
Mm-hmm.
which came out, that was last year, wasn't it?
February
Okay.
23. It's
all right.
Years already ago.
Yeah, time flies. And I bought it, and then I read that you were a big baseball fan. And I was like, oh, I like Pete even more. But then I came across the fact that you're a Yankee fan.
I understand. I understand that. I have been doing this. It's not for you. It's just because it was sitting there staring at me and said, please put me on.
Yeah.
Maybe they'll play better now. I don't know what's happening.
Yeah. Well, Cleveland is about to catch them.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah. So I'm pretty excited.
The Yankees don't deserve to make the playoffs, let alone win the World Series. They're not good enough. And the Yankee fans are hoping that all the dark underbelly is exposed and there's a cleaning house of management, which hasn't happened. And the general manager has been there for 30 years. And Boone, who I respect, but they're just not winning under him. He's been around for about 8 or 9 now. So,
yeah, my wife's from Long Island.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, so she's a big Mets fan.
Yeah, I figured.
Yeah, but then living here we live in Nashville.
Ah, yeah.
And so it's this interesting thing that happens where everyone from New York, they just automatically become friends because like that's their affinity. Yeah, and so some of our closest friends are Yankee fans, which he's all the time talking about how they need to get rid of Boone. So
yeah, that's the general consensus. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, this is not a baseball podcast.
It can if we want it to be. It can if we want it to be.
I know.
Well, stuff too.
Well, we can talk about how we can find common ground as long as we don't talk about the team specifically. Yeah.
It's one of the last vestiges of true tribalism, I would say.
I know, seriously.
In the West. So
there's no question, and it's nothing like the tribalism of, British football, for example.
Yeah.
It's still there,
So, but a sublimation of the same instinct, I would imagine.
Yeah,
so,
I think it is. I think it is. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So, one of the the reason I reached out, Pete, is because one of the things that we're trying to do here, I don't know if you had a chance to like listen or anything like that, but our shtick is that I've been labeled. We've talked a lot about labels and things like that, but I've been labeled as a progressive Christian, and I push back a little bit against that. I think it has a lot to do with where I live, and so that makes it seem like I'm a lot more progressive.
Push
than
back
maybe
as
I
much
am.
as you want, Jeff.
Yeah, and then there's
That's
Lucas, who has been identified as a traditional.
I'm fine with conservative. I'm fine with conservative atheist.
Conservative atheist.
Conservative atheist.
Yeah. But I've argued that, but he's from California, right? And I'm from Tennessee.
There you go.
Yeah. So basically, we're the same person. But we talk. The idea is how do we bridge differences? How people that would appear on paper that they should not be friends or would not be able to get along. How is it that we can do that? And then so what we do is we talk to different people. We talk about different things. And one of the things I was thinking about is something that's helped me. And so I'd like to hear you talk more about this is that for me, what really helped was the ability to fully embrace the fact that I don't really know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so it was that sin of certainty that I was able to, and over the time, it had already started to shed, but it wasn't until I read the book that I was fully willing to let it go. I felt like it was okay for me to not be certain anymore. Mm-hmm. And so I was hoping that you'd talk more about that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we have a similar experience, I guess, because I remember vaguely it was, The Sin of Certainty came out in 2014, I think, maybe 15. Okay. And I've been on this sort of path since probably the late 2000s, like maybe 2007 or 8, or even a little bit before that. And the relief that came to me, not just, I don't need to know everything. I don't need to be certain. But the simple fact that I just sit there and I say, I really have no idea what I'm talking about. And I don't mind that. I mean, see, the Bible, my field is Bible, right? It's not religion, it's Bible. And Bible is a concrete thing. It's a historical phenomenon. You can dig into it. You can make certain conclusions, draw certain conclusions, or based on your assumptions or whatever. And that's a different thing. But I'm also a person of faith, and there's much more going on than simply the Bible, right? And how you read it. It's what you think of God and what you think of faith and all that sort of stuff. And those are the things that I remember sitting in a room once at where I used to live, and I was just reading something. I don't know what it was. It had nothing to do with anything, but I just sort of stopped and just something welled up from inside of me. And what I said to myself was, I have no idea what the cross is about. I know what's written there. I also know the various things that are written there. I know the various opinions people have had, but I'm like, I don't know. I don't even know how that works. And what came over me was not panic and dread. It was just, oh, good, you're being honest, right? And I think that's sometimes the barrier that people feel, that they have to look a certain way or put up a certain, just a presentation they give to the world around them, especially at church. And I don't believe in any of that, because I think one of my core values is trying to achieve authenticity. I want to be real, and a fundamental faith item for me is I think God understands that and can handle it. And I'd rather I know people in my life who, not to ramble on here, but people in my life who were Christian and are no longer, and they did so for what I think are very good reasons in their experience. And I've had to ask myself, and it's a pretty easy question to answer, but I've had to ask myself, what do I think God thinks of people who are relentlessly honest and examining themselves and moving through this life, changing their minds or whatever, or people who just refuse to feel that prodding that comes up inside of us sometimes, that casts certain doubts on what we believe, and instead just sort of play nice, and stay on the beach blanket, color between the lines. And then if you do that, well, then God's fine with you. I said, that's not God. I don't know what that is, what you just described, but it's not God. So all those things take away that fear that many people have, and understandably so, about just not being certain. And to me, it's a necessary maturation for me, and I think it is for others too, to like, I don't know. I don't really know, but I trust, I explore, I have faith. And, if you take hell off the picture, a lot of things change too with this picture.
That reminds me, of how Hitchens would talk about Pascal's wager. I'm sure I'm,
Pascal, the philosopher.
Pascal's wager, yeah.
Right.
The wager being, just for anybody who doesn't know, the wager being that, if God doesn't exist, or if this isn't the right way, let's say if hell doesn't exist, then it doesn't hurt anything to say you believe in Jesus and God and do all the right things. But if it does exist, then that's a real big risk to take. And so the wager being, go ahead and it's kind of a game theory decision, right? You pick the thing that has the least amount of risk and the most amount of reward given the variables that you understand, blah, 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 right? And I remember Hitchens used to always say that when presented with that question, what do you think about this wager, and shouldn't you still just fall on the safe side? And I think Sam Harris has said this also, that he would hope that an all-powerful God, when presented at the end, would care more about a truth-telling soul than one that kind of, in his words, uses kind of a charlatan trick to slip in the back door, right? And that's kind of what I'm hearing you talk about here, is like that it's more important to be honest internally, because you're the one that you have to live with at the end of the day. Your own internal experience is the one that you're going to have to remain with. So losing your soul to protect a potential reward at the end doesn't seem like a great trade-off.
Well, yeah, and I agree with you. And I think you both have heard how much experience and intuition are maligned in certain Christian circles, because, well, that's sinful. You can't trust your own intuitions and your own experiences because they're sinful. You have to trust the Bible. That's usually what it comes down to. And what, of course, is often missed is the fact that the Bible is interpreted by subjective human beings. It's, in fact, a very subjective text. And
right, that it's your intuition that's guiding you to whatever your interpretation is of the Bible.
You cannot escape intuition and experience in, let's say, adjudicating the life of faith. You can't escape that. Right. And, Richard Rohr, who I like a lot, he's got this wonderful little analogy about a tricycle, and it's got 3 wheels, and one wheel is your experience, the other wheel is Scripture itself, and the other wheel is the tradition that you're a part of. And if you ask, let's say, an evangelical, what's the front wheel? And they say, well, it's the Bible. And Rohr says, no, it's your experience. That drives everything. Mm-hmm. And if a religion that has an incarnation element to it, if it can't handle that, it's not worth much to me. If it can't handle our humanity that Christians believe God was pleased enough to participate in and God's Spirit dwells in, to say that your intuition means nothing. See, what that really does is it reduces, this is the great irony, it reduces the Christian faith to essentially an intellectual exercise that's detached from your experience and your emotions or anything. It's just very logical. I say it's ironic because the arguments that are put forth for that are some of the most illogical things that I've ever heard.
And so, they get backed up against, sorry to interrupt, they get backed up at some point and then appeal to mystery when they run into the roadblock. Yeah. I always think about this where you want to participate in this kind of enlightenment level rational argument because, of course, that is what is the highest ideal in our particular culture, right? Is this because we're an enlightenment culture. So you want to participate in that until you hit the roadblock, and then there's an appeal to mystery,
right? Which
I think that you could probably just sit in from the beginning. You could just appeal to that mystery from the beginning.
Words out of my mouth, Lucas.
Sorry.
No, you didn't do anything wrong. I'm just saying, like, we're on the same wavelength here in that respect, because I do think that, the curveball, the last book I wrote 2 years ago, I explore the curveballs that have happened in my life that have led me basically to mystery. And, I have 2 chapters on quantum physics, which I don't understand. A chapter on evolution and anthropology, which I don't really understand either, not from a scientific point of view. And my point is that, especially with the Einstein revolution, that, time and gravity are like and space, it's all like a fabric that gets bent by mass. Like, what the heck is that even about? But if that's what it is, the bottom line is that the world we live in and the cosmos we inhabit is so steeped in mystery, whether it's the very largest things we're looking at or the very smallest things we're looking at. It's so steeped in mystery. How dare you not have a God who can keep up with that? That God it's him, it's not him, but we use metaphors to talk about God, right? God is ultimate mystery, but I think mystery that can be known, just like our creation is a mystery, but we can also know it and perceive it on certain levels. So we're not getting all of the Creator. We're getting maybe, think of a circle, we're getting like 1 degree or 2 degrees of an arc, but the rest of it is steeped in things we simply don't understand. So who can really understand God? And I know that's anathema to many religious people, but for me, that's what keeps me going. The fact that I get to think about these things and try to make sense of it, but the world doesn't hang in the balance with my coming up with the right answers, because we're dealing with something that's beyond us. And David Bentley Hart, who I like a lot, he's I don't know if you've read him, but he's a philosopher, sort of polymath kind of guy. But he says, all the great traditions have understood this. All the great philosophical traditions in Christianity and Judaism and Islam and Buddhism and anything else, they've understood that God is, at the end of the day, what we call God is, at the end of the day, that which cannot be expressed adequately by our thinking and by our words. And I think American Christianity's forgotten that.
Yeah, I it's been my experience that the more I embrace the unknowing, the unknowable, the larger God becomes, and the more convinced I am that there actually is something. When the more certain I was, the actual, let's see, how do I want to phrase that? The more I relied on certainty, the less able I was to be convinced that there actually was a God.
Hence the book's title, The Sin of Certainty. It can actually take you away, and especially if people force it on you, you have to be certain, right? So, yeah, I agree.
And then I was able to, just, I don't know. Like, for example, I was at a couple weeks ago, I had the opportunity to be on a panel at an atheist convention here in Nashville. And as I was leaving, one of the persons in attendance came up to me and she said, I believe everything you believe, which I thought was interesting, that an atheist was telling me she believes everything I believe, which I clearly stated that I did believe in God. And she said, but the problem with your beliefs is that none of it is actually supported by Scripture, which I also thought was very funny to me. But my response was simply, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't feel a need to defend that. I want to go back to something that you said earlier when we first started, that we had sort of a similar experience with growing up in the church and then kind of coming to this place where you just couldn't, at least for me, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but for me, I couldn't, all of the simple platitudes, the answers that I was supposed to have memorized, they just didn't sit well with me. You talked about being consistent. We've often talked about this idea of having intellectual honesty. But yeah, being a person of consistency matters to me. But when you started, and I'm trying to remember when I read it in the book, but when you started coming and dealing with this kind of thing, and what was the reaction that you got from the community that you were a part of?
Not good. I mean, I don't want to over dramatize it, but I was coming to some of these thoughts when I was teaching at Westminster Seminary, which is outside of Philadelphia, which is it's gone through various waves in its history from 1929 of being staunchly unapologetically Calvinist to more like willing to engage. And when I was a student there, we were more willing to engage. But as I became a professor there, the ground started shifting underneath me, and it became more one of these, basically make America great again kind of mentalities. Like, let's get back to the original and everything's going to be fine. So yeah, it in that sense, it didn't go well, but some of my real thinking started when I was sort of free of that. And I have just surrounded myself with people who value that and understand that part of the life of faith. And for me, part of that has been moving to more liturgical spaces. Like I'm Episcopalian. I was Calvinist for a while, and we attended a very nice, if you guys know the Nazarenes, but a very, very nice Nazarene church in my area that understood also things about spiritual journey. And I sort of explained myself to the pastor, and he said, Pete, what's great is sometimes people come here, they just lick their wounds for a few years and then they leave, and that's fine. We've done our job. And that's basically what I did, and then moved on.
That's the tradition that I grew up in as well, was Nazarene.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It wasn't specifically,
was it like
it was an offshoot of the Nazarene Church.
What's it called?
Church of God Anderson. It's out of the Wesleyan Holiness movement, but it's a sister denomination of Nazarene. And I grew up under, my senior pastor was a Nazarene. Like he was from the Nazarene tradition specifically. Okay. Went to Point Loma and for his seminary and all of that. And what's interesting that when you're talking about that, and I don't know where you were going with it and all the way, so I apologize about interrupting, but I think that's interesting. I think most people who, if I were to describe my upbringing in the church that I grew up in, they would say, yes, you grew up in an evangelical, maybe even fundamentalist, not exactly fundamentalist, but like definitely evangelical conservative Christian community. Mm-hmm. And that's true, but it did always have that. To me, I'm sure everyone's experience in that church would have been different in some way, right? But to me, it did always feel like it had what you were talking about, where there was like it's fine. We know what we believe here, but it's fine if you have these other questions. We're not going to shut down the questions. You can talk about it. Yeah, we're not threatened. You're wrong, but that's okay. We're not upset about it. We're not upset about it. Mm-hmm. I shouldn't even say it like that. Like, you're wrong. That I never got that. Right. I got definite teachings as I was growing up. This is what we believe, but I really didn't get the we're really concerned about this theological idea you have.
You weren't judged by them.
Right. Yeah. Right. Anyway, so I just think that's interesting, and that the lick your wounds mentality. I definitely saw people who said that about our church as well. Yeah, where they were hurt, they came and they licked their wounds, and they said that they were kind of they were comforted and healed through that, and then moved on.
Yeah. And they don't think of that as a betrayal. That's
right.
my experience, right? So, they, rather than thinking of your little tiny church as essentially, this is it. Why would you ever leave? Why would you get something else? And, there was a story by, oh gosh, I forgot his name now. He wrote a great book on, John of the Cross, Stephen. Oh gosh, he was a psychiatrist. Anyway, he would do seminars on, no, it was somebody else. Anyway, I forget all that. But this guy, famous guy, doing seminars in churches and asked to come to one mega church. And he was presented with this problem. And they said, you know what? We have this church, but we find people are leaving, and they're leaving to go to these like more liturgical churches and sort of this contemplative stuff. So we want you to teach us how to do all that stuff so they'll stay. And this guy said, who's famous, and I wish I could remember his name, said, what's wrong with them just leaving? Why do they have to stay? And that there's this arrogance really of thinking that, well, we're it, and it seems like you, Lucas, didn't have that experience in that Wesleyan Anderson, whatever you call it. That's new to me. I never heard of this. And I had too. And I think that's a really healing thing. And that's where I felt free to do more. I was doing more reading and exploring and talking with people. That led me to a liturgical environment where I learned to, the way I put it, honor my head without living in it. Right. I'm an academic, and, I've been taught that basically Christianity is something you debate about and argue over. And realizing I don't know anything really. I know a lot, but I don't know anything at the same time. To be in a place where the emphasis is not on, say, 45-minute sermons, which are really lectures. They're theology lectures or something. And to have you read from a book, and that's not stilted. That's participating in a communion that transcends your time and place. And I sort of like that. And, I like the 12 to 15-minute homilies because they usually get to the point pretty quickly. And the centering of Eucharist, which is mystery, right? And the mystery of Eucharist is the center of the Episcopal tradition. And all that has been, well, life-giving to me, and I'm, I haven't done anything for more than a few years at a time before I get tired of it, but I've been part of this since about 2009 or 10. And it's like, I still like it. That's stupid. It's something that I look forward to, and different things hit me in different ways, but I'm not in a place where I'm judged for being who I am, but actually valued for who I am. And I think people look for that. And I know the accusation, well, they're just tickling itching ears and giving you what you want to say. It's like, well, they're not doing that, but they're accepting me for who I am. And they believe that I have integrity, and I believe that they do. And, and they're questioners there anyway. We read the Nicene Creed every Sunday and get them talking about it in like an adult form Sunday school class. And they'll say, I don't really get this part. I'm not sure I believe that other part. And I'll keep saying it because it's part of the tradition, but I want to talk about it. And they're not thrown out, or disciplined or something like that.
So you said that you found a community where you were accepted. Do you still participate in community with those who still hold on to certainty?
Yeah, I do. I mean, teaching at a Christian college will help that too. But I'm dealing with younger people and also some of my colleagues, and that's fine. I mean, there's no arguments, and I'm careful about remembering that my students are about 45 years younger than I am, and they haven't thought about so, and that's fine. But they pick up things. We talk about things, and many find it liberating, and some find it a little bit scary, but nobody hates anybody, and so that's a good thing, and also, I don't mind saying there were people who were instrumental in making my life a nightmare the last couple of years that I was at Westminster Seminary, who since then have, if I can just put it this way, they've seen their complicity in something that is just wrong. And they've asked for my forgiveness, and I gladly gave it to them. And we hang out and drink beer every once in a while. And it's fun because we have a shared history and we can talk about those things. Even though their views are not where mine are, they understand where I'm coming from, and they're not fighting with me and I'm not fighting with them.
It's great.
It's sort of nice. Yeah. Doesn't always happen that way.
Of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I get that. So a friend of ours who I introduced her to your stuff, and she listens now to the Bible for Normal People pretty religiously, pun intended. And she sent me one of your episodes this morning and asked me to listen to it because she knew that we were going to be talking to you. And it was the episode where you talk about, it's from 2022, so I'm sure it's fresh on your mind, where, it's where you had done a blog and you asked people, like, why have they left faith?
Oh, yeah.
And then you sort of categorized it into 5
things, right? Yeah.
Right. But then you talked about why you remained. And so I was interested in that. Like, why are you still a person of faith? Like, why haven't you just said, you know what, I don't have to actually believe anything. I'm okay with not being certain about anything.
Right.
Which I think, isn't that sort of basically the, again, Lucas is our resident expert on this, but isn't that basically the atheist position, is that I'm just not convinced?
Yeah, I mean, it's yes and no. I mean, that's a good question, the way you put it. I have atheist friends as well, and we talk about things, or people who are, let's just say, determinedly agnostic, and to get to your point, I've called myself, I'm an agnostic Christian, or maybe a Christian that embraces mystery, and then the next question usually is, well, why stay in any of it, And I think I probably could unfold a bunch of reasons for that are meaningful to me. It might not be meaningful to anybody else, but part of it has been my experience of that tradition, right? The what I would call God moments that I've had, which aren't very frequent, but I've had moments where I just felt, man, I just know God's there. And I don't even know what I mean when I say God, but that's Peter Holmes, the comedian, says God is the blanket we throw over mystery to give it shape. I don't know if you've heard that expression. I love it. But I think that's true. And I say God with, sort of quotation marks, because I don't know what this being is, or if this is even a being. Anyway, that's a whole other question. But, so yeah, I lost track of the question here, Jeff. I'm sorry. Oh, why believe in anything? I think that's part of it, is my experience of God, and also the communities that I've been in that have been healing communities that are also working sort of in that boat. It's the boat of Christianity, along with other boats floating down the river. And that's sort of where I am. I think too of, my life of studying Scripture and its interpretation, and what the Christian community has sort of, how it's not appropriate is the wrong word, how it has creatively handled Scripture throughout its history is actually a very encouraging thing to see, because the church has sort of always known that, like, this literal meaning, yeah, it's a given. It has a literal meaning, but that's not what the interesting stuff is. If you want to make this tradition connect, you have to go beneath the surface and get very creative with the interpretation of the text. And so sort of our modernist, slavish attention to the exact words and what they mean, and they mean only one thing, and they can't mean different things to different people, that's part of the modernist mindset, which the evangelical and fundamentalist churches have bought into wholesale. And that's why it's hard to get along with them sometimes. And that's also why they lose every debate with modernists who aren't Christians, because they just take that thinking and make it more consistent, I think. It's living in those communities that has helped me as well. And also just, I've read the Bible many times, in the original languages, and I am struck sometimes by how the biblical writers sometimes seem to transcend their own moment in time and to talk about things. I call these mystery passages, passages that they're not logical, they're not arguments, but, something like, Jesus's high priestly prayer in the middle of John's gospel. And it's like, Jesus is about to be crucified and he prays for the disciples saying, Father, I pray that as you are in me and as I am in you, that they be in each other and they be with me and all this kind of stuff. That's mystical language, right? You can't really put a head on that. You can't just control that language. It's very mystical language. I think of, Colossians, whoever wrote Colossians, but, toward the end of the first chapter that the writer says, in his sufferings, he is filling up what is lacking in the sufferings of Christ. I have no idea what that means. I know it's very mystical. You're participating in the sufferings of Christ and filling up what's lacking in those sufferings by suffering yourself. And there are tons of these things in the Bible that some of it's just weird. Some of it's like another king who blew it. Do I have to keep reading 1st and 2nd Kings? And then Chronicles has a whole different take on it. What's going on here? But even that, to me, I'm watching later pilgrims of faith in antiquity take those older stories and rework them entirely because their circumstances have changed, right? And so for me, if that's the kind of tradition that's behind all this, sign me up, because I think it's our sacred responsibility to think about, to use the Christian language, how would Jesus show up right here and right now? And the answer to that is never, well, here's a Bible verse. The answer is, how are you in deep communion and conversation as a person, authentic person living now with this ancient tradition, which is manifold, diverse, internally contradictory to the point where authors sometimes debate each other in these texts, that is demonstrating to us, and this is the theme of how the Bible actually works, that the Bible may be more a book of wisdom that we're supposed to use wisely and appropriate wisely, and not just slavish like a rule book. And to me, those are just a few things that that make me, I want to be here. And I also understand people who don't. I'm just saying, this is for me. I'm not a good apologist. I wouldn't go out to, and this is why everyone should believe exactly as I do. I don't like that, but that's where I am. And I've come across many, many people in my life who are like, yeah, that's pretty much where I am too.
Yeah. In terms of apologists, I was thinking about Philip Gulley. I don't know if you're familiar with Philip Gulley or not, but in one of his books, he talks about the reason that he's a person of faith is because he just, at the end of the day, chooses to be.
Yeah. Right.
Yep. I just choose to be. And I've started taking that as my sort of my mantra. If someone asks me, I'm like, that's what I choose. As you were talking, I was thinking about a recent conversation that we had with Peter. I almost said Peter Enns. Peter Rollins.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Yeah. And he was talking about this idea, and I heard, as you were talking, this came to my mind. He talked about this idea that Christianity is the lived practice, and I'm messing this up a little bit, but of lack, where atheism is the intellectual embrace of lack, and Christianity is the lived experience of lack.
Mm-hmm.
And so you were talking about this idea of if it's about experience, there's like this mystical, this that I can't quite understand, but sign me up for that, I think is the way you put that. So anyway.
Right. And that's not unheard of in the history of the Christian tradition either. That's the thing. People think that everyone was sort of fundamentalist from Moses on, but that's not the case. And there have been monastic movements that left the tyranny of the organized religious machine, and went off in their own way to contemplate God. And I think that's why experience is the heart of this. The whole point of the religious journey is to have experiences of the divine, of the numinous. This is what it's about. to experience some transcendence in our lives. And like you said, I mean, Jared, a co-host of the Bible for Normal People, he says the same thing. That, like, why are you a Christian? He says, I choose to be. Well, why? Well, I just choose to be. I mean, he has all sorts of reasons, but it's like,
sure,
what people are looking for is like, I need the ironclad answers for why this is the best religion and no others are good. And that doesn't. I can't give that. I can't give that. I can talk about things about the Christian faith that attract me. For example, I mean, one thing about the cross and all that is, here you have a religion that has its roots in the 1st century. And the selling point was, your Messiah was crucified on a cross. Come follow us. It's so counterintuitive. And I'm attracted to counterintuitiveness because I believe that all religious faiths should be very counterintuitive to how we think and how we live. And I forgot who it was, a New Testament scholar. I'm getting older. I can't remember. I'm glad I can remember my name, let alone other people's. But somebody said, if you're going to set up a religion in the 1st century, this is not how you do it. You don't say your Jewish Messiah, who's supposed to, as Luke's gospel puts it in the first 2 chapters, protect you from your enemies and save you and deliver you from those who mean you harm. That's Zechariah's prophecy after he got his voice back in Luke. Was not the only, but it was a common messianic expectation among Jews. And here you have one whom Christians claim to be that very Messiah, who is crucified. And so you have God, in some sense, participating in not just a death, but a humiliating death, which I think turns on its head the whole honor-shame dynamic that drives a lot of the God talk in the Hebrew Bible. God gets offended. He gets almost embarrassed by the Israelites. You've shamed me. I have to do something to get my honor back. And which, by the way, is a great example of how what we're getting in the Bible is people's understanding of God, I think, less than God, because it's too contradictory anyway. But, so I think those things are, to me, they just make me stop and say, this is worth looking into a bit more. This isn't the fundamentalism that we see on TV or in the government. This is a deep contemplative and philosophical tradition that knows its roots, but also understands that we live in a different time and place, and we have to put these pieces together somehow.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting. I could talk about this forever. Your point about the shameful execution of the historical Jesus, I think is really important. I think that gets missed a lot because in the tradition that I grew up in, they would have understood. We would have talked about how, isn't this interesting how the Judeans were waiting for this warrior, and instead we got the lamb, and that was the point all along. And it was and it was presented, and then the cross was about being very painful and a terrible death and a sacrifice, really right? It really hurt. And it, and then the, the whole passion, right? The beatings, the thorns, the cross, it was all very painful. And that showed the sacrifice, which I think is, that's fine. But it was, and I really don't want to be dismissive about this, but it was almost presented kind of like the same way that we present the movie Rudy, right? Where it is the underdog story, right? Mm-hmm. It's the one we weren't expecting, that they weren't expecting, but we understand now that that was part of the story all along. And I think the shame part of it, I didn't realize that this is one thing that I feel like, and you can argue with me on this, but the historian Tom Holland has talked about, which is that the crucifixion was a slave's death. And it wasn't just, it's not just that it was painful because it's exposure and it's a long time to die and all of this, but that it was an acceptance. Everyone knew if you're being crucified, that means that you are the lowest of the low. You are, it is an acceptance by the society. Nobody gets crucified except for these terrible people.
Really terrible, right? Yeah.
Yeah. You could be a murderer. You're not going to get crucified. You could do a lot of terrible things and not get crucified. You'd have to be someone who was, and to your point, it was the humiliation of it. And so, to your point, this is not a way to start a religion, because
it's crazy.
It's not an underdog story. It is taking someone who the society has not said, you're a sad sack that we're oppressing. The society has said, you are the person we hate because you are bad.
Right.
And you're making the religion out of that. And so I think that's really interesting. And your point about flipping on its head the kind of honor society shame thing is really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, that meant a lot to me once I sort of stumbled on that. And, this is why, Mark's gospel has been called an apology for the cross. Mark's gospel centers on, and people who really know Mark have told this to me, I'm not just making this up, but how Mark's gospel is saying, no, the crucifixion is not harmful to the notion of Jesus as a messiahship. It's actually the core of it, right? So that's very counterintuitive. It's taking this thing that is anything but honoring and saying what makes Jesus the Son of God or the Messiah is that act. It's not the resurrection; it's the crucifixion that makes it that.
Yeah,
and that's an interesting twist to things, and from a historical point of view. And then you have, Paul in Romans, who says, I'm not ashamed of the gospel of Christ. It's the power of God for salvation, first for the Jew, then for the Gentile. And I don't know about you guys, I was always told when I was younger, well, that means you should never be ashamed or afraid to talk about Jesus on the lunch line or something.
That's right.
You need to say it. But Paul's not afraid. He's saying, I'm not ashamed of the gospel.
Right.
Why would he be ashamed? Because of how it started. He's got to, in a sense, he's got to sell to people, right? To Jews and to Gentiles, this Jewish guy who was crucified is your Lord, right? That's got to be, how did this ever catch on? I sometimes think to myself, how did this crazy story ever catch on? And I think the linchpin there is resurrection faith. I do think many people think this, without a notion of resurrection, which I'm going to just say is a mystery to me also, along with atonement and incarnation, all that kind of stuff. I don't understand any of it. But resurrection, I think, is what is the reason why Christianity continued. People believe that, and it sort of led it to flourish until it got co-opted by Rome in the 4th century, and the rest of it is history, right? But so I think that the counterintuitive nature of it to me is just a fascinating thing to think about, and it moves me actually to think about it. It's just like, this is not a logical system. It became that. This in the New Testament itself, David Bentley Hart uses this language. The New Testament is a Jewish apocalyptic text. The end is coming. It's around the corner. Don't get married, Paul says. It just hang in there, right? But
that's very. Sorry, go ahead.
It didn't end there. No, it didn't end there, right?
Yeah.
Because Jesus didn't come back.
Right.
And so we got to settle in for the long haul. And in the meantime, Jews are like, no, we're not going to believe this stuff. It becomes a Gentile movement by the 2nd century, very much in conversation with Greco-Roman philosophy, all of which is fine.
Right.
But that's sort of where it went. So when salvation means being delivered from your enemies and being preserved so you can, participate in this earthly kingdom that's going to be rebuilt because, God is going to return to his throne and all this kind of stuff. And to turn that into basically an afterlife journey,
right?
Where it's all about, that's what salvation really became at that point. It got sort of shifted to a realm that wasn't so Jewish, to be quite blunt about it. Right? It became more Gentile, more philosophical. So I find that fascinating.
Yeah,
and Lucas, you were going to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that is that goes right along with Bart Ehrman's entire argument that Jesus, the historical Jesus, was a Jewish apocalypticist, right? That was his message was, and this is his argument, but that his message was, the end is coming. Everything that is high will be brought low. Everything that is low will be raised up. You can tell who is evil because who's in power. You can tell who's good because who are the oppressed, and then they will be flipped. And that's his argument. And I think that's very interesting. That and I remember also when I was in college. Yes, I was a freshman in college, and I remember the first time anyone that I respected said, "Well, all of the New Testament writers, they all thought Jesus was coming back in their lifetime. That was the point." And so
and when they
have to realize
had to scramble in 1 Thessalonians, is well, here's how it's going to work,
Right.
Anyway,
yeah.
So yeah,
and then
they believe that, yeah.
And so it does put it in a completely different light, I think, because now we know, quote unquote, we know the rest of the story, right?
Yeah.
We know the end. And so again, it's similar to the issue of the cross. You were saying when you were growing up, I'm not afraid or I'm not ashamed of the gospel thing was like, for me, it's important to not be afraid of being like considered a square, being considered like a dork, right? Mm-hmm. That's the threat, is that you're going to be ashamed of talking about the fact that you're a Christian because people are going to think you're nerdy or you're a dork or whatever, right? And so you get over that. Whereas what you're talking about is like, no, I'm not ashamed of it because it's an execution chair, and who would worship an execution, an electric chair as their symbol, right? But the cross is now in a place of honor. In many, it shows up in places of honor, and so it's very difficult to understand that when you're looking at that, you're looking at like something that should be a symbol of shame, and in terms of how they thought of it at the time. And so that is interesting.
To recover, as others have put it more eloquent than I, to recover the offense of the cross. And that in that sense, the cross becomes very central, and not sort of as an element to a legal process of a transaction, but it becomes the deep mystery of the Christian faith, along with incarnation, I would say.
Yeah.
And one that we try to live into and try to understand and try to embrace and let it affect how we live. And the offense of the cross can help jumpstart that, to really come to terms with it. And, as Paul says elsewhere about, in the cross, Jesus is parading down the streets the powers that be in a humiliating sort of parade rather than the other way around. It's the whole flipping, right? And the cross is almost, it's God putting his money where his mouth is, in a sense of talk about flipping tables, talk about flipping ideas and expectations, of what true religion looks like. And not to get on a soapbox, but when you turn that into a source of political power over other people, you haven't just lost the plot. You've buried it underground under layers and layers of crap.
So when I came across your stuff, it provided me language for what I was experiencing. And then you talk about losing the plot here. It sort of helped me. I don't know if I want to say regain it. I don't know what I want to say here, but it helped me. It helped me become a better person, maybe to be a person who was more open to other people and other ideas, and it just gave me a new perspective on not just my faith, but the faith of everyone around me, or even the lack of faith of people around me. So I know what I got out of reading and listening to your podcast and all that kind of stuff. But I do want to know, why do you do it?
Do what?
Why did you set out to write, like to begin to write and to share these things and to do your podcast?
Oh, well, here's a little secret. You ready?
Yep.
It's just me journaling out loud.
Okay.
I process that way. And I do, and not only that, but I do also want to, I hate the phrase hold space for, but that's sort of what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to let people know there is a big space out there of people who think like you do, and you're not alone. And there is a community for you. And that's one reason why we created the Bible for Normal People, intentionally to foster some sense of community and to present them with information like, well, here's another take on this old thing. And wow, that makes sense. I didn't know you could think about it that way. And I said, well, you can. In fact, most people do, frankly. So, and that helps people. And I think that, there's a pastoral dimension to all this for me. I'm not a pastor. I never will be ordained, although the tax breaks would be great. I actually have too much respect for the ordained ministry to sort of talk about it flippantly, but I'm sort of like a chaplain in a sense, when I talk to people or engage with them online or answer emails. And I think I feel good about that role. And those are all reasons why I do it. I'm trying to clear my own thinking, and in doing that, maybe help other people who are interested in it, and not shove it down their throats.
Well, it's been very helpful for me. It's been very helpful for our community. We've used several of your Bible studies, the Bible for Normal People, for discussion groups that we have.
Oh, like the commentaries we have? And
Bible for Normal People, Romans. We did Revelation. And so the people that you've started bringing in and writing, it has really helped us create like this whole community where people, like you said, we've found that a growing part of our group is people that are just looking for a place to lick their wounds and say it's okay.
Yeah.
And so it's been very helpful for that. Are there any new things that you're working on right now?
I've been really active on Substack. I'm having fun on Substack. I have provocative notes and some provocative posts, but everybody's happy because it's a self-selective group, So, so I'm doing that sort of stuff. I've begun thinking about. I haven't started yet, but it's in my head, and I've jotted down some notes, and I've talked to some people about sort of on a theme of being Christian after Christianity, and what that looks like. And it's going to be, if I write this, it would be very much about that sort of mystical turn. And there's a famous quote, you guys may know it, by Karl Rahner, the Catholic theologian. He was part of Vatican II, and back in the 60s, he said, pardon the sexist language, the future Christian man will be a mystic, or he will be none at all. And what he means by mystic is basically a person of experience, right? Where the faith is more learned and lived than simply lectured. And he's responding to things like the Holocaust and things like the explosion of scientific information and all sorts of things like that, and saying that the Christian dogma, I think I can put it this strongly, Christian dogma does not adequately address all these things, and maybe we're finding out that God is maybe beyond all those kinds of petty discussions and dogmatic arguments that we have. And instead, to remain Christian means you need to get in touch with your experience as a human being, and then, in a sense, commune with God, rather than reducing it to a system of thought, for example, which is, again, part of the modern disease that really began during the Reformation. That's a bit simplistic, but that's sort of the we've been in that stranglehold for a few hundred years, and so, yeah, that's what I think.
Well, you write it and I'll read it.
I'm going to try to write it. And, if I do, I think I will. Once I catch the fire, I have to catch the fire. And right now it's starting to glow a little bit, but I've been thinking about this for over a year, and I have to wait for the right moment, but it's not going to be long. It's going to be, I don't have the book here. Rowan Williams has a couple of nice short books on Christianity and stuff. I want it to be very readable, very small, and not technical at all, but just, we got to think differently about God. We have to think differently about faith. We have differently about the Bible, and frankly, just differently about what it means for Christians to show up in the world around us.
Yeah.
And that would mean, transcending maybe some familiar language that we have, but all that language is born out of its own cultural moments, and we have our own to deal with. And so what's going to happen? So
I could talk in another hour about that, but we're up against it. And so I thank you so much for joining us. I've been looking forward to this for several weeks now, and it's been great. Thanks.
What's the name of your Substack? Is it just your name?
It's called, you can find it by my name, but Odds and Ends, ENNS, not ENNS.
Very good.
Which
very well done.
Clever.
Yeah, that's well done.
It's clever. That was my idea. So just my thoughts about stuff. But I have a weekly thing on Wednesday that first one of the month is free. Everyone after that, you have to have a subscription, like minimum $5, which a lot of people give.
Yep.
But the notes that I put, they're public to anybody, and I put out sometimes 2 or 3 a day, at least a few a week. So
very good. Cool.
Thanks.
All right, guys.
Great to meet you, Pete.
Yeah. See you.
Pleasure.
Bye.
Thanks.
Yep.
Thank you for listening to Living on Common Ground. Please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and share it with your friends. You can also find a link to our social in the description. The more people we have living on common ground, the better the world will be.